My name is Eric Cash, and I'm a performance artist and comedian. Well, I actually started a punk rock circus in 1997 or 98, and that was a whirlwind. We did 5 U.S. tours and traveled around. We did a whole bunch of crazy shit, and then when that all kind of folded in on itself, I was looking for the next thing that I wanted to do, and I realized that if you do comedy, you don't have to carry anything. Yeah, I've toured during comedy. I've toured during circus. I've toured all over the world. I flew into New Zealand 6 years ago with $11 US in my pocket, throwing up the whole way, and then did a street performer festival, and then crashed a month-long comedy festival in Melbourne, Australia, and then stayed over my visa for a month and came home. Yeah. I don't know. I've done lots of stuff. Let's narrow it down. If you give me specific questions, I can tell you stories. There's a million stories. When it's all just like 17 years of your life, it's like, yeah, I did that. One of my best New York stories, actually, it's not so much a story about New York, but it was back when I was still touring with my circus. And when I toured with the circus, like, at times we had like 48 members and 6 vehicles and 9 dogs and a chicken and it was just madness for years on end. And I always drove. I didn't take care of everything, but I took care of a lot, and so I was always exhausted. And I kind of learned how to do this power nap thing where I would sleep without going completely unaware because I always had something to do. So we were doing this show in my circus. We would do one thing that was a more structured one show in some places. Some places we'd go to, like where we went in New York, which was this place called Ruby Lad, which is it was called Ruby Lad for years and years and years because that was the phone number. And it was this underground arts collective. It's this big, huge building with all these different rooms. They'd do these huge underground parties. And back in the day, the way that you would find out what they were doing next is you would dial RUBULAD. So they were called Ruby Lad. And that was how they, like, built their underground following. They had a mailing list, and they had this phone number that you could call. And so when we would go there, we would do... a bunch of other artists would do things, and then we would do different things in different rooms, and the party would go like 9 hours. And so we show up in Brooklyn to do Ruby Lad that year, and a lot of times when we would do shows like this, like there would be some stuff that we'd already done that we'd do, and there'd be other stuff there where we'd show up and we'd be like, well, let's also do this and this and this. So one of the things was they wanted to do this big shadow puppet show. So during the daytime, everybody had been up on the roof with like refrigerator boxes and shit, cutting all these shadow puppets because they were going to make this big shadow puppet show. And while we were getting ready for the show, I needed a nap really bad. So I went up to the roof. Nobody was up there, but there was all these like leftover pieces of cardboard and one full refrigerator box that hadn't been cut into at all. And I was like, perfect, that's my spot. So I crawl into this refrigerator box and I lay back. And I'm doing my nap, and I had my watch, so I was like, I would look at the time every couple minutes to make sure I knew where I was at and all this stuff, and I was just getting my rest. And as I'm sitting there resting, I have about 10 minutes before we're supposed to go on stage, and I'm ready to go. Everything's ready, and I got real lucky because the entire circus had started to panic about where I was, and where they decided to powwow while they figured out what to do without me was around my refrigerator box. So as I'm laying there getting my nap, I start hearing this conversation because they're slowly gathering, and for some reason they've just made a circle around where I'm sleeping and have no idea that I'm there. And they're talking, they're like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I can't find Eric. I went up and down the street. I've looked all over the building. I can't find Eric. We can't go on without him. And somebody else is like, okay, we can go on without him. Maybe I'll MC the show. And then somebody else gets in a fight with them. Like, no, if he's not here, I'm going to MC the show. And I'm just listening and grinning the whole time. And I'm still like getting the last little bit. And I'm watching my watch until 2 minutes before we're on stage. And and I had a butterfly knife that I kept in my pocket, and I stabbed it through the box and cut through and jumped out in the middle of their panicked conversation and screamed, "Let's do a show!" and ran downstairs, and it was one of my favorite moments ever.
That is awesome.
I just got real lucky that day. I think that's half of my appeal to being a performer is like not the stuff you do on stage, but the weird, absurd situations that you get to create chaos in that just happen randomly around you when you're on tour. On our last tour, we were in Fort Worth, Texas, and so our crew had gone from, like, in the beginning we didn't even have a show. We just kind of made it up, and it was just pure chaos. Towards the end, we were a lot tighter. And on our last tour, the direction that I decided we should go, because my circus, we did all sorts of things that were just, they were just way fucked up and completely out of control. Like, we finale'd with our Bed of Nails act. He would suck his own cock on a bed of nails. My girlfriend at the time was our second to last finale. And she did an electricity act early in the show, and then in the finale of the show would do this thing where she lit a light bulb in her vagina. We had this series of crazy shit. So on our last tour, I wanted to really push it over the edge. And so we took all of the jokes out of the show because any of the jokes about this stuff just cheapened it. And the whole structure was very tongue-in-cheek, like full-on, we are superheroes and this is our thing. And what we did was so absurd. But it was very much like steely-eyed, never admit that anything is fake or anything. Like, we'd perform like in these insane outfits. And that was my whole thing. So that year, we're playing in Fort Worth, Texas. And Mickey's act, my girlfriend at the time, who did the electricity act and the light bulb thing, she would do this old school electricity act. Early in the show, she would come up and I'd tell this absurd story about how her mother got shocked cutting drywall with a box knife when she was pregnant or something. I don't know, some shit I made up. And she would do a series of stunts that were really amazing. She would, we'd say that she had electrical powers, and she'd shock a member of the audience. She would light up a fluorescent tube between her hands. I would light torches off of her fingertips and then off of her tongue. And then the finale of that little piece was I would light a torch off of a goblet of water that she held to her forehead. And then we'd move on, and she'd do the light bulb in her vagina thing and all this stuff. And like I said, we didn't let on that there was anything other than pure superhuman ability happening here. And the whole thing was really insane. So when we played Fort Worth, the first time we had done it was a couple years before, and when we were showing up, we called them at about 6 because we'd pulled into town, and the dude was like, "Hey, I'll be there in a minute. It's going to be a little bit because I have to take down all this chicken wire. The band from last night, they wanted chicken wire wrapped around the stage." And we were immediately like, "No, keep the chicken wire. That's great. We want to perform behind chicken wire. That sounds awesome." And that became the tradition. Every year we would go back and play this club, and we'd perform behind this chicken wire. So what happened this particular night is we do our show, and by the time we would end, like, I would just get people believing in this absurd bullshit. Like, they would be bowing down to her, screaming, "I believe." And so we're breaking down after the show. Everybody's still in their gear, and there was this little channel next to the stage. And so we've pulled down half the chicken wire. We're emptying out the stage, taking things out to the van. And these kids that had seen the show came up, and they wanted to smoke a joint with us. So we're like, okay. And Mickey and our clown named Sticks, they're smoking this joint. I'm taking stuff in and out. And the kids are kind of sitting across from her. She's sitting on the edge of the stage. They're sitting on this little couch across from her in this tiny little channel, not even as big as this booth. And while they're talking with her, they're very fascinated, and they want to know if she can actually do this stuff. And they're kind of trying to flirt with her at the same time. And they're getting really stoned really fast. And as it's going, they're talking to her, and then one of them decides to make a move and gets up from where he's sitting and goes to sit next to her. And when he does, in a split second, I figured out later what happened was that the device that we use to put an electrical charge on her body had been shuffled around as we were getting out. And the body plate on it must have been laying against the chicken wire. And the foot pedal that operates it must have been laying right where the dude sat. And the way that the electricity from these devices works, it's like a tiny little Tesla coil. It's not like house electricity. So it likes something really open that it can conduct itself on rather than a wire. It doesn't like wires. It likes big open things. So what happens is as he's talking to Electra Girl, he gets up and he sits down, and as soon as he sits next to her, the entire stage flashes blue with lightning, and it blows the power on the entire block, and everything goes pitch black. And we're standing there with this kid's joint, and we just look at him and go, well, we told you not to touch her, and walk out. And that was one of the best moments we ever had as a circus. It's a good comedian story. There's a time that I spent a night in jail with another San Francisco comic for assault. I want to come up with a better one than that. That's a good story, but this one's just actually really... I think it's funny, but it's pretty dark and gross. So when I was in Australia and I was street performing and doing comedy the entire time. And I was kind of on a tear. And there was this night, and it was really close to when I left. And I was kind of having culture shock. I was kind of done being in a country that wasn't home. And the night before, I had been out doing street shows on the streets, and my friend Laws was a juggler from England, and she was about to leave the next day. And she was like, hey, Eric, so in Australia, in Melbourne, on South Bank, all the people that do big circle shows, we're all rotating out with each other all day long. It's a rotation of like 17 people all doing hour-long shows. So we're there all day waiting to do a show, or we've done a show and we're waiting to see if we can do another one, or we're just there hanging out with our friends. So Laws comes up to me and she's like, hey, Eric, it's my last night in town, and I want to do a group show, and I want you to MC it. And I'm like, okay. Now, street performers are great, but they don't often do great group shows. But when they do, they're awesome. Usually we're all about ourselves and just trying to make our money or whatever. But if you get all of these crazy people to do one big group show on the street for free, it's insane. So I'm instantly into this idea. And so I look at her, I'm drinking a beer, and I go, if you manage to get everybody to sign on, you got me. I'm there in an instant. And she goes, okay. She runs off. She comes back about 15 minutes later. She's like, I got 6 people to sign on and 5 more that might do it. So let's do it. And I go, okay, let's do it. And as I'm saying, let's do it, her finger goes in my mouth, and I feel this piece of paper. And I realize she's just jammed a bunch of acid in my mouth. And I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be that kind of party. All right. So it comes time to do it. And we go out to do the show. And I start building the crowd, and I can build a crowd like nobody's fucking business. And I'm also really tenacious because my acid is kicking in. But it starts raining right as I start doing it. And I'm lighting torches, and I'm talking up a crowd, and I'm doing my very best. And I keep going, but it's pouring rain. And I have about 15 people watching for about 30 minutes, but they're not the same 15 people. Like, I continue to build, but I'm also losing people because they're getting poured on. But also I'm tripping, so I'm not even paying attention. I've got a goal, and I'm going for it. And eventually Laws comes up, and she goes, mate, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Let's just go get hammered. And I'm like, okay, fine. Let's go get hammered. So we go, and we drink a whole bunch. She gives me more acid. And I'm drinking, and somebody gives me this big line of blow. And then I'm drinking, and I'm still tripping. And And then in the midst of that, like, my acid starts to wear off. And I don't know if you've ever combined a lot of booze with a whole bunch of LSD, but while you're on the LSD, the booze is doing absolutely nothing. And then as it wears off, just in seconds, you'll be shit-faced because the levels of your psychedelic dropped below the levels of the booze in your system. So then all of a sudden, I'm really drunk. I go home. I take my friend Kat with me. I go back to my warehouse where I'm staying with a bunch of artists. When we walk in, they've got all these lines of Molly out because they've been partying back at the warehouse. And so I walk in, and they're like, Eric. And then my roommate, whose name is Badcock, I'm not making that up, he goes, look, I got this for you. And I'm like, cool. And I do this huge line of ecstasy. And then I immediately look up, and I go, wait, I'm really sorry, guys. But I just realized tomorrow's the last day of the weekend. The weather's getting bad. So my last chance to make money for a week is tomorrow morning, and I have to wake up at 9 to get down to the spot. So I'm really sorry to do your drugs and do this, but I have to go to bed. So I go to bed, and I pass out immediately. And in the morning, I wake up to my friend Manx, who's a sword swallower, and he's got coffee in his hand. And I sit up, and I go, oh, you're a mate. You're so great. Thank you. And I grab the coffee, and I take a sip, and I give him a big hug. And I walk out into the living room of my warehouse. And my friend Kat is sleeping on the couch, and so I jump under the covers with her, and I give her a big hug, and I tell her good morning. Then I jump out, and I give my roommate a big hug. There's another warehouse next door to ours through the courtyard. I go over there. That's the circus warehouse. And after hugging everybody in the circus warehouse, I finally realized what happened is that all that ecstasy I did right before I went to sleep decided to wait until I woke up to work. And so I was like, oh, shit, I'm rolling really hard, and I'm really hungover, and I'm still a little bit tripping. Okay, I'm on a lot of drugs. Let's go to work. And so so we jump in the van, and my friend Manx, whose van it is, he goes, okay, here's the plan. I have a gig at the casino today, so I'm going to go down to the casino, unload, then you're going to drive the van over to the spot, put me in the rotation for the day. Hopefully I can get a show too. And I go, oh, you want me to drive? And he goes, yeah. And I go, okay. So now I'm on all these drugs. It's 10 in the morning. I have to get to the spot by 10:30 a.m. I don't have a license. I'm on way too many narcotics. And he wants me to drive in a country where everybody drives on the wrong side of the road. So I go, okay. Okay. Oh, and I'm over visa at this point. So I'm completely illegally in this country. This is a pile of laws that have been broken right here that I'm just going to expose myself to. So I drop him off, and I go trying to get to the spot in the van. And I miss the turn for the alley. And I have to drive on the wrong side of the road, and all the traffic rules work differently because you're on the wrong side of the road. And the last thing I'm going to do is try and flip a U-turn, not knowing if it's legal, being on all these drugs and illegally in the country. So I decide to go around. But where we are in Melbourne is on one side of the Yarra River. So when I go around, I actually have to go over the bridge, over to the other side of the river in downtown, go 3 blocks, come back around, go back over the bridge, and come back around. And unfortunately, I missed that turn 3 times. So I just kept doing these big circles, trying to hold my shit together on all of these drugs in a foreign country where I'm not supposed to be there because I'm over visa. And I finally get close enough. Like, I just finally give up. Like, I can't get the turn. And I just go, I'm fucking parked. I'm out of the van. Fuck everything. Okay. I have all these drugs in my system, like, rattling through. And as I'm walking to the spot, in a matter of 3 seconds, 2 things happen. I go, oh, God, no. And then I shit myself. Like, immediately. Like, I felt it coming, and I was like, my body doesn't have any muscle control. This is just going to happen. Fuck. And then it does. So I've completely shit myself. So I head to the spot, try not to attract any attention to myself, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I put our names in the rotation for the day. I keep my distance from everybody. We finally get our slots for the day, and then I just tell everybody, hey, I'm really tired. I have to get back home. Because really what I need to do is burn my fucking clothes and take 5 showers. But I'm too scared to get back in the van to drive back to my warehouse, so I decided to take the train. And that's when all the drugs in my system decide to crash at once, and I have no serotonin left, and I go into one of the worst temporary depressions I've ever been in my life. Like, I'm on the train, like, my pants covered in shit, purely because I decided to do all these drugs in a foreign country. I'm questioning every decision I've ever made. I'm, like, massively suicidal, and out loud on the train, I've just become the crazy person. Like, out loud, I'm just going really loudly like, it's just the drugs, Eric. It's just the drugs. You're going to be cool. Everything's fine. I finally get home. I get rid of all my clothes. I take like 2 showers. I scrub myself. I'm hoping this will at least make me feel better too. I get changed. I take a couple deep breaths. I go back to the train. It's another hour ride back. I get on the train and it happens again. I'm just so depressed and I'm just shouting out loud, it's just the drugs, it's just the drugs. In my American accent, like everybody knows that I'm foreign. Like all these people are going to work in downtown Melbourne. They have no idea what to think. I get back to the spot and my friend Bruce is setting up for the early show of the day. And I go, all I'm going to do is sit down and watch Bruce's show. I don't want to think. I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to sit down and watch Bruce's show. So I sit down and I watch his 45-minute show. And I laugh at the jokes, and I start to feel a little bit brighter. And he finishes, and I'm smiling, and I've like gotten past this horrible suicidal depression. And I look up, and the clock tower across the river is chiming 12, and I just realized that before noon I have hit every spot possible on the emotional map. Like I woke up like in love with everything, because I was rolling. And then I was, like, frightened, and then I was excited, and then I wanted to kill myself, and now it's noon. I'm starting my day. And I wound up not doing any street shows that day. But instead, my only way to deal with it was I kept my shit going until about 4 p.m., then I started drinking, and then I was like, fuck it, I'm going to go do stand-up. And I wound up, during the Melbourne Comedy Fest, there's this open mic that all the people from the festival are doing, all these comedians from all over the world. And that night, they decided to have me headline it. So, like, the audience is mostly, it's some festival people, but it's mostly people performing in the festival. So it's all these crazy talents and artists from all over the world, and it's just insane. And it goes on for, like, 2.5 hours, and they're like, oh, we want you to close out the show tonight. And I was like, okay. And at this point, I'm, like, blind drunk. I'm still coming off all my drugs. I have no idea what I said, but apparently it was like the best set of my life. Like people were talking to me about it for weeks afterwards. And I think I opened up with I woke up high on ecstasy and shit myself this morning. And that's all I remember. Well, I was never supposed to be in this town for very long in the first place. I came up here in 2013 because my dad got sick. It was a bad time for me to give up being in LA. I had just started to make a little bit of headway there. In 2012, I met my wife. No, she wasn't my wife at the time because it doesn't work that way here because we're not in India. But very quickly, like, she had cancer and then she died. I tried to go back to LA to start putting things back together. Then my dad got sick. Then I had to come up here. So I've actually just been kind of like waiting to settle things out with my father. My father passed about a year ago, but I've been really destitute since I came up here. So I was trying to get a hold of my inheritance. That's a big mess. So now I'm just going back. I'm just going back as soon as I can. So yeah, I mean, I'll be back around Portland, but for me, like, I don't make enough money doing what I do. I feel that I'm very good at what I do, but, you know, you have to be more well-known in order to have enough of a draw and sell enough tickets to string it all together well enough to pay for your existence. So I need to go back to LA. There's a lot of people that I like to work with there on small indie projects, all of which are smart things for me to do for my career and are fun things that I like to do. So, yeah, I'm heading out probably in the very end of May or in the beginning of June. Probably not. I hate sitcoms. my plan throughout the thing with my wife and then throughout the thing with my dad was that because what's the best way to put it? Like, I'm good at what I do. I just am not known. And I never wanted to be known through forms of media that I don't like. Like, I don't like most comedies. The stuff that I like is really weird. So what I decided to do a while back was that I was going to take all the money that I was inheriting, which isn't much, but it's a chunk, and throw it into a series of projects that I developed for television. But when I say for television, I'm going to produce everything on monetized YouTube channels just for free on the internet. And I have 2 shows, one of which is a mock reality show about an industrial band that tours the world playing different hotspots, because when we're not on stage, we're hunting cryptids like Bigfoot and Chupacabra with vintage synthesizers and oscillators. I have another show that's a comedy show that I do live, but it's comedians basically challenging each other in the moment, called Loose Mics Start Fights. So I'm basically just going to start a media company. I don't know how successful it'll be, but I do think that all this stuff that I've been writing and producing will just create... I think enough people will like it that it increases, my turnouts and the number of people that know who I am and want to come see me, which is all I really care about. My goal was never to be filthy rich. I mean, if it happens, that'd be neat. I'd probably wind up giving half of it to charity or my broke friends. Like, that's not really my goal, but at the same time, I do need some form of security, so that I can continue moving in life. And so I have all this content that I've built up, but at the same time, like, I could try to do it here in Portland, but it's way better for me to try and do it in LA, where all the people are that do that sort of thing. Like, we have creatives here in Portland, but it's a tiny little town. It's really hard to get things moving. Like any project that you try to do that involves multiple people, like, sure, you may be involved with this person that's really talented and this person that's really talented, but everybody's really scattered. Everybody's trying to survive. When you're in Los Angeles, everybody that's there is all trying to do something. And there's millions of them. It's a better place. It's a better place to be for me. If I was more well known, Portland would be a fine place. I could just come up here and go on my tours and everything would work itself out and everything would be great, but it's not good for me right now.
Cutting loose.